Well, hello. It's a real pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm joining you from Edinburgh, where it is a very dark evening. It gets dark very early these days, and I'm talking about magically optimizing your fonts. Um, and I hope that's something that you want to do. Inject a bit of magic into your life and into your apps. I mean, I couldn't add a great deal to what Jen said. Very kind introduction. Thank you. If you don't know me, I lead the Nuxt core team, and I'm also involved in some other projects like Nitro. Um, I have a few websites you could check out, like pagespeed.dev or firstcommit.is, and a few libraries. So Magic Regex makes regular expressions type safe. And Fontaine, well, I'll be talking a little bit more about that this evening. So this is normally my view when I'm standing here. I'm obviously looking at the camera, but normally I'm looking at my cat, Barley, who is absolutely normally in this position. And if I knew a way to keep her right here, cuddling with me, whilst also being able to type, I would be very grateful man, because she's so lovely to cuddle, but absolutely gets in the way when it comes to actually doing any typing or coding. So I want to talk to start with about the challenge of web fonts. So I don't know whether you recall the days when web fonts were difficult. Maybe you used some custom script that rendered them via individual images, or via Flash or something like that. But these days, web fonts don't seem to be that challenging. So it's generally speaking accepted that the way to stick a web font in your app is just grabbing some code. You grab some code from Google, perhaps. You put a few links in your head, and then you just use the web font, and it works really well. There are a few problems, though. This is easy and as magical as we might want our web font integration to be, but it does have some issues. And in particular, the issues that we start to face are to do with Core Web Vitals. And if you haven't come across Core Web Vitals, they are crucial for any web developer to understand. And I won't be talking about all of them tonight, but check out that link. By the way, it's a fantastic introduction, a great way of finding more out about them. So just to say what they are, so LCP is largest contentful paint. It's how long it takes after a user navigates to your website when the largest bit of the page renders or makes its last layout shift. So for example, if you have a really big headline or a big image on your site, when does that bit render? When does it finally render? And this is meant to capture something of the of how long it takes to render the most important bit of the page. There's also cumulative layout shift, or CLS, and this is one of my personal bugbears. I don't know what your least favorite Core Web Vital is, but I think cumulative layout shift is. I'm so glad it's a Core Web Vital, because this is the least favorite bit of navigating to a website for me, where you open the website, it loads, you click a button or something, and just as your finger is about to touch the screen, or your mouse has clicked, something else slots in, and you get the web is changing a bit. Maybe it's a cookie banner, or maybe it's like an ad quickly jumps in, or maybe it's just the paragraph font size changes or something like that, and everything moves around on the page. And that is a very good metric to track. You want that to be as little as possible, just as you want the largest contentful paint to be as short as possible. And a new one, which just came in over this last year, interaction to next paint. And that is basically after you interact in some way with a site, like clicking a button or a link, how long does it take for the browser to get a chance to paint the screen in response? So some kind of indication that you have done something. Your click has registered. You have not just clicked on a frozen page, you've clicked on a page which is interactive. And I would love to talk about all of these, but in particular, what I care about right now talking about is this cumulative layout shift. And that is where web fonts can cause huge issues. So there are a couple of ways of handling this, a couple of ways people can deal with it. And so there's this property, font display, which allows us to set how we want our fonts to render. So if we're rendering, say, Poppins, and we say actually font display block, this is what it will look like. So you'll see, I'll do that again. You should basically see a blank page, no font, and then at some point the font loads in the browser, and hey presto, you get the text. Now the great thing about this is there is no layout shift because the layout doesn't change. The layout is either there's no text or then there is text. It will increase your time to largest contentful paint because this whole thing is an area of your page which gets refreshed. But it should address the layout shift issue because you're not having text change its location or position. But that's not great because you do get this flash. And so instead, we try most of the time to go font display swap. And this is actually what Google would recommend. For example, if you're embedding a Google font, let's say, use font display swap. And it will look something like this. So you load in first fallback font, whatever the browser's native fallback font is, probably not Times New Roman, I would recommend. And that, which is why normally you would put a, sans serif fallback or something. And then when the web font downloads, then it swaps across into that font. Now, what you do see here is that there is a lot of shift. This is just visual because thankfully each of these lines perfectly fits at this particular width anyway, no matter which font it is. But you could certainly imagine a situation where that isn't the case, where 2 lines becomes 3 lines or 1 line. And that kind of thing, it contributes to a lot of negative user experience on the web and is something we really, really don't want to promote or cause. And so there are other options. You can try and get as close as possible to the font and reduce the shift. So here we're using a native font, UI sans serif, to render Poppins. And again, that's much better than Times New Roman. Still not perfect. And that will obviously change hugely depending on which font you pick. So if we chose Nunito, for example, it's going to look a little bit different. And so you can spend a lot of time fine-tuning and planning what you're going to do to decrease this shift. And often this is a last mile thing. This is what, once you've built your website and you're working on optimizing the performance of it, this is where you're working through your page speed insight score, and you're trying to see, how can I make this, are there any opportunities for me to improve these metrics to make the site more performant? Probably not things that you've been working on all the way through. But anyway, still, it's a bit of a problem. And so there are some other things that we try to do to reduce that time between the initial page rendering, because you want that as fast as possible, and the time when it's finished, when the final web font has come through and the page is updated. And so there's some things we do. So it's possible to inline fonts as data URIs. This is a common practice because it means that you have no gap. Basically, the page instantly loads with the font. It's problematic in that it's not cacheable, and it greatly inflates your HTML because you now have all the size of the font in your initial HTML, which will have to be re-downloaded every single time you visit that site. Every time your website is redeployed, there's no way to cache that. And so that's generally speaking regarded as not a good choice from a performance point of view. It's possible to subset fonts. So instead of having a font which renders every possible character that you could write, you can say, actually, we only happen to use this font for the headline. So let's just reduce the characters in the font to just the characters in that headline. And you can create a font which is much smaller. And this is definitely worth adopting. Only problem is it's not really scalable. It's not a very easy thing to do. You have to create a custom font. There's some tools you can do, but then imagine you change your headline. Now you have to recreate your font. And so there are some issues there. And you can preload fonts. So this is what you'll notice with the Google Fonts API. They'll recommend that you pre-connect to the origin from Google Fonts, but they don't actually recommend that you preload them. And this is because your fonts will probably be in a number of different formats. You might have WAF2 and WAF. There is a time when you may have needed more to support older browsers. And you don't really want to download more than necessary. So you don't want to preload everything. You only want to preload what the browser needs. And you might have fonts that aren't used on a given page. So you might have italic fonts, font faces, or you might have bold, and all of these might be separate files. Do you preload all of them, even though a given page might not require all of them? So preloading is a very, very tricky thing because you can very easily think you're improving performance, because the effect of the preload is as soon as the browser comes across that link preload, it starts downloading the file. So it means it's a lot faster. The alternative would be you would have to download the HTML, you download the CSS, then the CSS references a font, and then the browser doesn't actually start downloading that font until it finds a selector that matches something in the HTML, and then it starts. So that can be quite a bit later. So preload can make it much faster, but the downside is it adds significantly to page weight, which also can make it slower. So none of this is great. None of these options are great. Some of them are better than others, but none of them are really ideal for everyone or easily deployable for that matter. So there is a very, very interesting solution, which credits to Katie Hempenius, who's an engineer at Google. And her observation was that we can actually use font metrics in CSS to reduce the layout shift that happens. So setting aside the download of the fonts, that's a separate issue, we can decrease the shift. So you can, for any given font, investigate describe that font in terms of metrics. So the ascent, like the degree to which a letter goes up above a baseline, the descent, the degree to which a letter goes below a baseline, the gap between lines of a font, the size of that M, and so on. And actually you can then use this to create metrics that make two fonts very similar to each other. So if you have a fallback font, which is something like Arial, something that the browser actually has installed, and then you have a web font, you can shape Arial to be as close as possible to the metrics of that web font using size adjust, ascent override, descent override, and line gap override. Obviously, these are going to allow you to map it somewhat onto the web font that you're using. And the great thing about that is that you can create something like this. So you could have, say, Poppins, and then you have your Poppins fallback. And then you define that fallback, and you say, okay, we're going to use Arial. And then here are the metrics specifically for Arial. And if we did something like that, it looks like this. Can you see that? That's a very, very minimal change. Just to compare what it is, if we don't have those metrics, it's like this, right? Do you see the huge difference there? This is much wider, and it goes much narrower. But if we have the font metrics override, it's almost the same thing, right? So obviously the shape is changing. You can't control that. It's a different font after all. But you can make the characters sit in the same position largely. And that means you're much less likely to have things like different line counts. So like 2 lines become 3 lines or something like that. And this is a hugely useful tool when it comes to improving the performance of a website. And so I built a library that would make this automatable. And built on top of a couple of other key sources. So there's a library called Capsize, which was originally created to do something that's really fantastic, which is to make web fonts as reliable in the browser as they are in design tools, so that when you're talking about the gaps between lines of text, they should behave in the same kind of way. So a designer can lay out the text on the screen and know exactly where that text is going to sit. In order to do this, Capsize created a library of font metrics to lay out fonts correctly on the screen. And I've been interested in this for quite some time, created a library called PostCSS Capsize. But it was actually some time ago, in fact. But it was actually with this concept from Katie and Peñas that this became really, really useful, because we could take the metrics that describe the font and basically be able to calculate for the user, for you, what the metrics need to be. So rather than go through and manually come up with those particular metrics for pop-ins or whatever, we can actually get it automatically done for us. And then the second tool we were able to use was Unplugin, which Anthony Fu created originally, a unified bundler plugin architecture, so that you could write a single build plugin that would work with any supported bundler, whether that be Webpack or Vite or ESBuild or Roll Down a Farm or whatever might come. And so you can write extremely simple rules, plugins like this one, which basically specifies things like when do you want the code to run, which files do you want it to apply to, and what do you want it to do. And so we can apply that to, say, just CSS files and actually inject overrides automatically for people. So UnJS Fontaine is the library that came out of that. It's bundler agnostic. It works with any framework that uses any of those builders, and is pure CSS. So there's no runtime. It should be a pure positive effect on web performance and user experience. We also have just recently released a new library called Unifont. And basically, when using web fonts, you can obviously, so Fontaine takes care of the actual metrics, but you also want to be able to do something like find out what web fonts are supported by providers that are out there. And if you want to use a web font, it's very helpful to know things like what the font files to inject, what the metric, what the CSS should be for using that font, so that instead of just adding a CSS file that pulls down from, say, Google CDN, we can actually embed the font data inside our own project. And so Unifont provides an agnostic API for looking up and getting this data from a whole range of different providers, from FontSource to FontShare to Bunny to Google to Adobe, and even supports custom providers, and even supports anything that you basically want to write. It supports the ability to do that, and then use them again in a framework agnostic way, so in any project that you might need to use them in. But in particular, we brought this into a single project, Nuxt Fonts, that basically uses all of these different tools to accomplish making web fonts magical. And the idea is that you shouldn't need to do any configuration at all. You shouldn't need to compromise on privacy, so there should be no third-party origins or request to third-party origins. And it should be the most performant way that you can use that font as much as possible without requiring the user to do anything. And this is a pretty sort of optimistic target, but this is what we tried to do. So the idea is that we would take the code that you might write as a user and take any font family, a reference that you have in your project. And so from that, we can do two things. So first, we can spot that it's Poppins. We can perform lookups using Unifont to find, okay, what's the information we need for Poppins to render that in the browser. So how can we render Poppins? And so we can pull in all this kind of stuff. We can we can inject, actually I haven't put this on the page, but we can inject the font we'll put it at the underscore fonts prefix. We'll download the font from Google in the background and serve it up from a hash from part of your local project. And then we'll use all of the metrics like the Unicode range, the font weight, the font style that Google provides us. And so basically you get the benefits of having that access without any of the cost. There was a time previously when serving fonts from a CDN was beneficial, but for privacy reasons, there is no benefit now to serving font data from a CDN because it's not shared, the cache isn't shared across origins. And I could go into why that's the case. It is actually desirable for privacy. It was otherwise possible to fingerprint people, but it is a bit of a shame because there's no benefit at all to having a font on a CDN. You're much better off having it on your own website. And so in this case, we're able to do that. We're able to download it from Google or FontShare or FontSource, wherever it might be, into your local project. We're also able to produce this fallback declaration for you and automatically create it based on whatever fallback you provide. So in this case, we've provided that sans serif as the fallback. And so we map that across to Arial being our closest sans serif. And then we're able to generate the overrides for that fallback font, which means that without any effort from the user, we should be able to render that font in the most optimal way possible. So just a quick demo of that, if we've got time. I have pulled up on my computer, thankfully in advance, another window of Nuxt fonts project. This is a completely new project, so I'm going to have to add the fonts module. And what that will do is basically add the Nuxt fonts dependency and add it to our modules. And I'll run the dev server. And I'll open this in the simple browser embedded in Visual Studio. Hope this is going to work. And if we then go into let's try that one more time. Might need to split. There we go. So if we then add some text here, it's not optimistic. I'm going to have to show you this in a separate browser in a moment. So basically, if we add some text and we add a style block like this, and we add our font family, like this, then when we open up the browser, and I'll just very quickly load that in. Here we go. You won't get the feel, I think, but there we have our font. It's loaded in Poppins, and I'm refreshing the page. I don't know if you can actually see that very, very faint wiggle as the Arial fallback turns into our Poppins font. That's so fast because it's being served locally from our project, so it's not downloading it from Google. And the font fallback override makes it possible for the font metrics to exactly match the metrics of Poppins. And that should be all the configuration that people need to do for our project. If you want to use more font weights, you might have to add a line in your Nuxt config. We might try and detect that in future, but it's a little tricky. But the aim is to optimize your fonts automatically. And I hope we have delivered a little bit, at least, on that. If you're interested in taking any of these things further or finding out a little bit more about how this works, do check out the docs on nuxt.com and fonts.nuxt.com. Do follow Nuxt on Blue Sky or on Twitter as well, or join Discord to ask questions. about how it might work or how you might be able to contribute to the project if that's something you're interested in. Final offer. I have an open diary if you'd ever be interested in chatting, if there's ever anything I can do to help, particularly if you're interested in getting involved in open source, for example, whether that's Nuxt or somewhere else, and you feel like you might not fit in, please give me a shout. I'd love to chat. You can book 10 minutes of my time. And I always love the calls. It's really nice. So do book, and I'd love to help if there's any way I can. It's been a real pleasure and a delight to chat to everyone today. I hope there were some interesting topics there, and feel free to ask me questions if there's anything I can answer for you.
There are questions. All right. Question number 1. For developers who aren't familiar with font optimization, what are the best first steps they should take to improve their site's performance?
So the fonts probably will be coming towards the end of your performance optimization list. The most significant item for most developers will be images, because images most contribute to layout shift. The most significant thing is give your images dimensions. The browser won't use those dimensions to render them exactly. It will use the dimensions to preserve the aspect ratio, which is the most important thing in reducing layout shift. CSS can affect what the image's size is, but you need to give your image explicit height and width. And if you use Nuxt image as a module, then not only that will actually generate the appropriately sized images. It will give a source set of possible images and let the browser pick the appropriate one. So if it's on a mobile screen or a desktop, it'll pick the right one, and you will basically, this is the best thing you can do to take your site from, as 40, 50, and Lighthouse score up to 80, something like that. It definitely do this first. You'll also maybe notice that there are other opportunities. So Chrome has a fantastic performance panel that lets you see the events that take place. Don't just run page speed insights tests. By the way, they can be very, very variable. And you might think you've got a very performant website when you're testing against your local machine, but you won't see the same result in production. So do be careful about that. But there's a very helpful panel that will show you key events like last contentful paint and whether any layout shifts were triggered by additional resources that are loading. That's a very, very helpful tool to use. There are so many things really to talk about, but those are maybe some good ones to start with. And if you do use PageSpeed Insights, it has lots of helpful recommendations. So almost everything it recommends will have a practical example of something you can do to fix. They're mostly actionable. So to fix all of the issues that it reports before even moving on to anything else.
Thank you. And I like the mostly actionable.
Yes.
All right. Next question. What challenges did you face when using Fontaine and Unifont?
So the challenges, I think, are, that's interesting. Well, I think it's interesting to see. So I built Fontaine first, and Unifont more recent, and Nuxt fonts more recently. And I think when I originally built, I plan to go back and redo a lot of Fontaine. So I was using a regex-based pattern. With Nuxt fonts, we use AST parsing for CSS, and it's much better approach. Challenges, I think the great thing was building on top of other tools that other people are creating is a really helpful way to go about things, because you benefit from their expertise and what they bring to the table. You don't feel like you have to make everything yourself. I don't feel it was that challenging. It was just a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you. CLS is a huge issue, and so many huge companies have websites with high CLS scores. Lower is better.
That is true.
Yes.
It is true.
Can you maybe give us an idea of why?
So it is worth saying that, and this is one of the things that people start looking at Core Web Vitals for, or PageSpeed Insight scores for websites. If you find that there are e-commerce giants like Nike or Adidas that have terrible lighthouse scores, and you can guarantee that they do absolutely everything in their power to the point of spending millions to make sure that their site is as optimized as possible for enabling people to spend money on it. So you might say, why is this the case? And the fact is, there are often the score is not the most important thing. And this, I feel like I'm in danger of undermining what I've said, but a score, it's only a tool. The score is only a tool to help you optimize the site to be the best that it can be at your objective. And your objective is to, you have a business objective, I guess, is the most key thing. And often user experience assists that business objective. So for example, if your objective is to sell widgets, you'll find that people are more likely to buy widgets if they can get through your checkout process and access your website. And so that, again, that's your objective. And there'll be a lot of things that contribute to that flow being effective. The site loading quickly is a very, very important one, but it's not necessarily the only one. So huge companies, for example, I don't know all the details here. You'll find that for example, employee dashboards are often not optimized to load very quickly because the employees are going to use them anyway. So the speed with which they load doesn't make a profound difference to the effectiveness of the dashboard. But there's a lot to say here.
Fair enough. Thank you. Last they checked, Adobe Fonts requires fonts to be served via style sheet from their CDN, including a secondary style sheet for tracking usage and domain. Does Nuxt Fonts bypass this? Next. I said
It
Nuxt,
does.
right? Okay.
Yes, you did. So with every provider, we very much say you need to check with the terms of service of the provider. And I particularly think that's true of Adobe. So read the terms of service and make sure that it's possible. But what Nuxt Font does is it does serve up the font from your website locally. And if that is against the terms of service, then you should not use it. But yeah, check the terms of service. And I think that there are some other ones as well that may require sort of attribution and things like that. We don't substitute for that. You'll always need to make sure you're acting in accordance with the font provider.
Thank you. How does Nuxt font /fonts combine with variable fonts?
We do now have support for variable fonts. So again, this is more a matter of how the different providers implement their variable font support and what variable acts. So the idea of a variable font, by the way, is that you can have one font file that can render different things based on different axes. So for example, boldness is something that we often think of as or weight as an axis, but you might have other things like, obliqueness as an axis, or sort of informality as an axis. So something might go from sort of very careful to quite scrolly, and different fonts have different axes. So we do support it, and if you use Google Fonts, you can pass an experimental options property for the particular font with the axes that you want to support. And the reason is that if we just throw every possible axis in, it creates very large font files, even if you don't use them. So that there is some sort of nuance to using them, but it is absolutely supported.
Thank you. And for our last question, and it's a pretty important one, when will Nuxt 4 release?
So I wish if it were up to me, it would release tomorrow. But the key thing for Nuxt 4 is that we're combining the release of Nuxt 4 with breaking changes in our dependencies. And so what we're waiting for right now is for our dependencies to be updated to their breaking changes. In particular, that is H3 and NitroPack. And so those need to have their own major releases before we can go ahead with Nuxt. Now we've been delayed. That's not, by the way, that we're sitting on our hands. It's that we're working across quite a large number of repositories and packages to get stuff ready. And that's also not just working, that's also working with providers and across the ecosystem. This is particularly true. Puya's been doing a huge amount of work on Nitro. We recently had a very significant release with 2.10 with a lot of the refactoring work already in place, even though the breaking changes haven't come. And so I think you should be very optimistic about Nuxt 4, but I can't give a firm date because it's not up to me. It is dependent on some of these other packages.
Thank you so much for joining us once again. Amazing. Thank you, Daniel.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Before we get to our final speaker, we have a few things to go over, like, have you done the DevStack Challenge? I'm skipping the first one because this one was way more exciting for me, but I'll go back to the first one. Don't worry. The DevStack Story Challenge. Every developer has a story. What's yours? We want to see how your journey started. Pick 3 to 4 items that represent your coding story, snap a photo, and share it on @X, tag NuxtNation and NuxtNation and hashtag NuxtNation24. The most creative entry will win a prize worth $300. So go ahead, show us what makes your developer journey unique. And I have an example. Bam. This is mine. My DevStack story started in July 1st, 2022, when I started a live stream called Teach Shan Tech, where I started learning how to code. And this is just a screen of the mic and the camera and doing this all the time. So it has started and it's taken a long time to get here. Wow. All right. And tag me in yours when you post them. I'm very curious and want to see everybody's too. And then spot the secret 3. Have you found the ducks? There's so many ducks. I want to see the ducks. I love the ducks. So attention to detail pays off. 3 ducks are cleverly concealed throughout the conference space. Spot them all, and you might just win a training worth $300. Game on. So make sure you submit your discoveries. And again, this is under in Veto under giveaways. And then last but not least, the post-event survey. Of course, you want to do this. You want to see better conferences in the future. What can we do better? What do you want to see in the future? So we'd love to hear from you and what you think about the event. Take 5 minutes to fill out our post-event survey. And as a thank you, you'll be entered into draw $300 worth of View goodies. It's quick and easy. And who knows, you might just walk away with some View goodies. Yay. And one more Nuxt certification offer. All right, y'all. If you're wanting to get into your Nuxt certification, be able to show off that you know your stuff, check out, you'll get 55% off by going to certificates.dev/Nuxt, and you'll get another $20 off by using this code. So go ahead and go to certificates.dev/Nuxt. You can create your account with either GitHub or Discord. You'll see everyone on here that have helped with getting these certifications created and see what career opportunities that you can get to. So definitely take a look at all of these. This is something that can definitely help out with your career. All right. And up next, we have Harlan Wilton. Let's give a big round of applause to Harlan Wilton, who will introduce us to Nuxt Scripts. Harlan is a freelance and open source developer based in Sydney, Australia, with a passion for building exceptional packages in the Vue, Nuxt, and Beat ecosystems. Harlan is committed to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in web development. His insights will surely inspire and inform. Welcome to the stage, Harlan.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. Welcome to the last talk. It's very impressive for anyone who has made it this far. I jumped on the conference at the start, had a big nap, woke up, and here I am. It's a bit unfortunate because the talks look really, really interesting this year, so it's a bit sad to miss it. I'm going to have to jump on YouTube when they're released. I did catch Daniel's talk, and I have to say Nuxt fonts is definitely one of my go-to modules for anything I'm building. Super, super awesome, and it kind of goes in with what we're talking about today, which is third parties. We're specifically talking about scripts in this instance, but relying on third-party fonts will have a bit of overlap there. So yeah, it's 8 o'clock for me in the morning. I've got my coffee. We are going to get through this last talk together, and yeah. I'm super excited to be here. This is my second Nuxt Nation talk. I did one 2 years ago for the version 1 of Unhead, where we talked about some of the new SEO features within it, like use SEO meta. But yeah, today we're talking about Nuxt scripts, why it was created, what it's solving, and yeah. So I'll just give a quick shout out before we begin. Nuxt scripts was a collaborative effort between the Nuxt core team and Google Aurora. So shout out to those guys for helping us getting it done. And big shout out to Daniel and Julian from the Nuxt core team. So let's get into it, shall we? We're going to start with a quick little stat here. So Google, they have all the benchmarks of what they want from us. They want a 200 millisecond total blocking time on mobile for a good green performance. And if we're relying on third-party scripts, we've completely blown this budget already. So if you've tested your site with Lighthouse, PageSpeed Insights, then you know the issue here. The total blocking time is usually the big red number. But yeah, before we dive too deep into it, my name is Harlan. I'm part of the Nuxt core team, and yeah, I've built some packages in the Nuxt ecosystem. My socials are there. Please connect. I love to see what you guys are up to, and yeah, it makes everything much more enjoyable. Little fun facts about me before we get into it. Last year was pretty crazy for me. I was basically living out of hostels, doing open source. Managed to go through Asia and Europe, so that was very cool. And very fortunate enough to meet some of the other Nuxt core team members in Amsterdam, Paris, and UFest Japan. So that was really amazing. And yeah, actually, the intro was a lie. I very recently moved to Melbourne from Sydney. Melbourne is great. I'm a bit of a coffee snob myself, so it's really great for me as Melbourne is the coffee capital of the world. And evidence of that, I guess, is that within 30 minutes of me, there's like 10 coffee roasters. So it's a good time. If you're ever in Melbourne, please hit me up. I love connecting to the community. So the thesis for Nuxt scripts is third-party scripts are inherently bad, and there's not too much we can do about them. They're usually out of our control that we need to add them to the website. And not all third parties are bad, just most of them. So to look at what's going on, what's bad about them, we're going to look at data from the Web Almanac. Now, this is a data set and kind of insights pulled from the top 10 million sites. I have here that the data is still being processed and it's not officially published. That's also a lie because yesterday they actually published some of these. So actually check out that website. There's some really cool insights on there for some of the metrics that they track. But yeah, we're looking at third parties and the not officially published yet. So I looked through the data to see kind of what insights I could pull out of it. So, how prevalent are third parties? Like, I'm sure you've all added them to your own websites. Well, 92% of websites will use a third party. So if you've managed to publish some sites without them, honestly, well done. They're usually unavoidable, and we'll add them to our sites. Usually we like to see analytics, how many people are using our site. We like to know that people are visiting. But yeah, on average, there's at least 5 third-party providers, and they'll make 78 requests. So a lot of data here, a lot of things moving around. And this is what a typical website would look like. Maybe some of you have built a site like this. I know I have. 54% of sites use Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, and then 22% are using the Facebook Meta Pixel, and 36% of sites are using Google Ads, which a little bit scary. I don't personally use Google Ads because I think they're super ugly and they're super slow. And I think, won't get into Google Ads right now. So yeah, privacy concerns. When we use third-party scripts, we're basically giving these scripts full permission of our users' data in some instances. So we know this is the case for advertising networks, right? So obviously Google Ads needs to track everything. The Meta Pixel, Taboola, there's heaps of them around. But there's some surprising third-party scripts that are tracking way more than they should as well. Things like share this, add this. They collect way too much data. So if you're using either of those, please delete it right now. But also reCAPTCHA. So reCAPTCHA is doing very advanced, like fingerprinting. So it's collecting heaps and heaps of data about the user's device and location, things like this. And what's happening with that data? I don't know. And yeah, things are getting worse. Browser fingerprinting has actually become an industry, and a lot of money is going into it. So being able to uniquely identify someone, an anonymous visit, just based on their device and any sort of metrics they can pull around the IP address, things like this. And these ad networks and things like that are getting quite sneaky. They're implementing CNAME cloaking, which allows them to basically hide the fact that, they're loading the script. So that's that one. And poor cookie compliance. I hate cookies like anyone else. Well, I don't hate cookies. I hate cookie consent banners. They're really annoying. But unfortunately, that's all we have at the moment. And yeah, sites just aren't really implementing them to consent requirements, or if they are, they're using kind of sneaky dark patterns to make sure you always click accept. And this is just a little infographic from ghostery.com. They're a privacy web extension for Chrome. And this is just some of the data they've pulled from their own users. So you can see here, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of data being collected and slowing down our sites. Security. So when we load a third-party script from someone else, we're basically saying, hey, you are going to solve my problem. I have a problem. I need a chat widget. I need, payments, whatever it is. And we're trusting that they keep this script secure, that when our users are loading it on their browser, nothing sneaky is going on. Well, only 23% of sites will use integrity checks on these scripts. That means these scripts can be updated at any time and basically take over your website. So we give a lot of power to third-party scripts, and we don't really ask too much of them. The reason why most of the third parties don't like to give integrity checks is because they like to have the ability to update the script at any point. So it's definitely a trade-off, but I don't think it's a good trade. We're not very good at implementing content security policies. Shout out to Nuxt Security. Does a great job of this, but less than 19% of sites will set this up, which basically gives scripts full access to do whatever they want. And yeah, these attacks are getting more frequent. So I think it was last year, the polyfill.io incident happened. If you don't know, polyfill.io it was basically kind of allowing you to use newer browser features in older browsers. Got sold to a Chinese company, and those new owners decided, hey, we have access essentially to 100,000 sites. Let's do something sneaky. So not good, not good. And these attacks are getting more frequent. So this is how I'm feeling about third-party scripts at the moment. It's not really looking good. And yeah, we're not over yet. So performance concerns. Obviously, third-party scripts are bad for performance. We know this. So generally, your IMP scores are going to get hurt. So if you're using any scripts like Hotjar, Clarity, things that are tracking the entire user session, it's not good. It's not good, right? These scripts tend to have like this waterfall loading pattern. And when we start looking into optimizing our website, we'll learn pretty quick that we want to avoid these waterfall style loadings. So when we load a third party, we can't really do anything about this, and we just kind of have to deal with how they've optimized these scripts themselves. And yeah, we're paying a legacy browser tax with all these scripts because these scripts need to work for every website, and every website includes websites that may still be supporting dead browsers. So through some of your third parties, you might be shipping polyfills for IE, for example. So not ideal, right? And this is just like an example of some of the third parties and their performance, their total blocking time for them. So we can kind of see here who's the worst offenders. Stripe, maybe that's a bit alarming, but it's because they're doing all this fingerprinting for fraud. So it can be very useful, but we need to kind of weigh up, when are we checking users for fraud versus when are we just trying to give them the first impression of a website. But yeah, some of these guys have no right being here. Like Intercom is just ridiculously slow. And yeah, you can see because we're using so many third parties, we have to start implementing third parties to manage our third party cookies. So you have things like CookieBot, right? So that itself is quite slow. So we're not really in a good situation here. But all that's good, right? We know they're evil now. So we use Nuxt, and we want to know specifically how these third-party scripts affect our Nuxt apps. So let's imagine we have a little Nuxt app here. We have our Nuxt app entry, which is going to contain view router, unhead, all our plugins and stuff like that. And we have, let's say, a Google Analytics script here. Now, both of these are not going to block the HTML parsing, as we have async there and type module, which is essentially the equivalent of defer. So what's going to happen when we load this file here? Well, we pass the HTML, and immediately we're going to fire off these two network requests. Now, straight away, for users who have very low bandwidth, you're going to have the network competing over, which file gets most of that bandwidth. For modern internet, that's not really a problem. It can deal with this quite easily. So yeah, both of these scripts download, and then we're in a situation where, let's say Google Analytics manages to load in just a few milliseconds before our Nuxt app. Well, Google Analytics needs some time to set up on the main thread. I'm not exactly sure what it's doing in this time. I did a quick benchmark, and it was around 15 seconds. So during that 15 milliseconds, our Nuxt app, even though we've loaded in our entry script, is blocked from actually starting. So that's going to delay everything. It's going to delay your app interactivity. So not good. So this is just one script. We can imagine if we're using the 5, right? So I think this GIF is perfect. It kind of sums up everything I'm trying to say. Nuxt is not its own special little bubble. It's just another script that you're trying to kind of push through. And most people set up their third parties in a way where this is exactly what's happening. So we want to avoid this. We want to try and make some order out of what's happening here, make the Nuxt bubble bigger. So yeah, look, we can use third-party scripts quite easily at the moment. We have usehead, the unhead composable, and yeah, quite simple, right? We have our source and we have async. Please make sure you're using async or defer in your scripts. And yeah, we're just going to call a function that this script is going to provide on the window. So you might have spotted the issue already, but we run Nuxt full stack, right? So we can't just use window in a Nuxt component. So we need to check for that. Great, Nuxt has this great import meta client, which is going to tree shake this code from the server build. However, we then have another issue. Track is undefined. So what's happening here? Well, the script hasn't loaded. So how can we tell that the script is actually loaded in? There's some kind of smart ways to do it, but we're feeling a bit lazy, so we're just gonna wait 1 second. And look, this code works. Like all we're doing is like tracking some analytics, so we don't really care. It doesn't need to run at any specific time. We just want to send this data off at some point. So this works. But you can see here that the developer experience wasn't very nice, having to rely on all these little hacks. We're missing types. We can still run into errors if ad blockers are blocking this script. And if we want to kind of use this code in other components, we have even more issues. So yeah, all these problems lead us to Nuxt scripts. And Nuxt scripts is trying to kind of raise the bar on performance, privacy, and security. We can't fix everything, but at least, yeah, we can get the bar a bit higher. Developer experience, we can definitely solve developer experience. If Nuxt is good at one thing, that's it. And yeah, we do this through some composables and the script registry. So useScript is the heart of Nuxt scripts. It's actually a unhead composable that Nuxt exports itself. And you'll see the syntax is like fairly straightforward. The only thing that might be look a bit strange is this use function. And all this is doing is kind of creating this mapping from our script to the actual API that it adds to the window. So for Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager, you might have the data layer here. So what's this doing behind the scenes? Well, when we're rendering this on the server, all we're going to do is add a link tag. And this link tag says, hey, if the network is free, if you're not doing anything, can you go and get this script and preload it for me? Now, when we hydrate our Nuxt app, we are actually going to insert the script tag and say, hey, I want to actually run this script now. And if everything goes right, then we're going to make sure our script is going to run immediately after Nuxt finishes hydrating, making sure that our Nuxt app is interactive and can be fully used as quickly as possible. Now there's some cool features within useScript. So on loaded, this guarantees that the script instance is actually available. Very handy. We have the useScript trigger element. So I highly recommend you use this if you can. It is a way to only load the script when there's a certain element event happening. In this instance here, we are going to load the script when a button becomes visible. So very easy way to make sure we're not loading these scripts on that first load, and we can kind of progressively enhance our app with these third-party scripts. Likewise, we have the use script trigger consent, which is for helping you with cookie consent, making sure that we have the user's permission to actually download the script before we go and execute it. So proxy. Proxy is like an interesting one. It lets you call functions on this script as if it had already loaded in. So in this instance here, we're calling track, but maybe the script hasn't actually loaded yet. So any calls on this proxy accessor is going to queue that function call. So if you're using analytics, this is very handy. You don't need to use unloaded. You can just throw it in here and trust that it's going to work if the script loads. Now, of course, we have type safety. You know, we're Nuxt. We like types. Usually, you won't need to provide these, as the types can be inferred from the use function, but they're there if you need them. And yeah, we have full control over like this script lifecycle. We can set a manual trigger and then load it whenever we want. We can call this warm-up function, which will add that link. We can remove it, see what the status is. Gives you full control. Okay, script bundling is definitely one of my favorite features. It kind of solves this performance, security, privacy issues off the bat, which is when we build our Nuxt app, it's going to go and download this script and self-host it. Now, this isn't advisable for every third-party script, so it is opt-in. So yeah, have a look and see if it makes sense for the scripts you're using, but definitely a win. Yeah. We have the script registry. So at the moment we have, I guess, 22, because that looks even, third-party scripts that we support. And there's more coming. We have a few in the pipeline. And yeah, we want to be like this go-to solution for any third party you need, instead of having to go and download all these one-off modules that just install the script for you. And just a quick note on using it. So the left, we have just a global setup. So if we don't care about interacting with the API that is exposed from using this script, then we can just use this, nice and easy. And on the right, this is more programmatic way to use it. If we want to access these underlying APIs. And just some features for it. We validate that you're actually providing the correct options to initialize the scripts. All the registry scripts in the documentation will tell you how you can set them up with environment variables. Fully typed, of course. And these are all the registry scripts are built on top of use script, which in turn is built off use head. So you can use any feature you can use in either of those. In this instance, we're again going to only load the Google Analytics script when a button becomes visible. We also ship facade components. So these are very important for performance if you're loading in heavy libraries. And just quickly, what a facade component is we're rendering a little widget just using our markup, our HTML and CSS, and we're going to make it look like the real thing. So we're going to try and make a little YouTube player with, some tailwind, something like that. And the trick is that when we have a good idea that the user is actually going to click in to interact with this, then we load in all the scripts. So you can see the power of this in these benchmarks. So it's a bit small, but yeah, like 46% faster for the YouTube embed. And of course it is, because we're not loading any scripts, right? So definitely useful if you're using any of these providers. And just a quick note on facade components, they're headless. So yeah, we don't tell you how they should look. We give you like a head start, but it's on you to kind of style it how you need. We handle all the loading states. So if you need to fall back to an error, if you want to do something while it's loading, very easy to set up. And we have this prop here above the fold, which will allow the component to provide some extra performance benefits just from using that prop. So where next for Nuxt scripts? So we are in kind of like a beta stage at the moment. We're still kind of working out the final features, but web worker support is definitely a priority. We want to implement PartyTown with these scripts, make it seamless to use. PartyTown is known to be a bit buggy, so still need to figure out some edge cases there. More registry scripts, of course. We're looking at how Cloudflare Zeraz handles their third parties. So we're looking to kind of pull some of that functionality into Nuxt itself, or Nuxt scripts itself. iframe script sandboxing, very cool way to kind of restrict what a script can do when you install it. And growing the community. So yeah, we need people to use Nuxt scripts, right? To put more energy into it. So yeah, we've taken on quite a few contributors, and anyone looking to contribute themselves would be more than welcome to the project. And that's it. You've made it to the end of the last talk. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a privilege to be here. And yeah, let's connect.
We do have a few questions for you. So
Sure.
to get started, what are the key benefits of using Nuxt script over traditional script loading methods like using plugins?
Yeah, so I kind of highlighted this in this slide where you kind of, you're in this situation where you're trying to manage the server side and client side. So that's pretty easy to solve with like a client in the plugin name. I guess you get all these types, and you get this nice kind of script loading API. So you can easily hook in to know when a script actually loads, when it doesn't load, what the status of the script is. And you also get an easy way to kind of share it around your components. So if you need to call the underlying APIs from these scripts, you can do that very simply, whereas you're going to have a bit of a mess trying to accomplish it through setting it up in plugins.
Great, thank you. Are there any specific scenarios where you wouldn't recommend using Nuxt script?
So yeah, it's an interesting one. We try through the registry scripts to pre-configure things for the use case that makes sense. So for example, if you're using Cloudflare Analytics, we want to actually insert the script before hydration, because Cloudflare is trying to monitor all the web vitals. So there's certain scripts that need to be kind of configured very delicately. So it may not make sense to use Nuxt scripts when you're using those. For example, as well, we add in these privacy attributes, which is the referrer, whatever attribute it is, and cross-origin. These two attributes break some scripts. So you might run into like a headache of like, why is cross-origin blah, blah, blah error? And yeah, that's because we are implementing better default privacy settings, which can be annoying to debug if you're not familiar with it.
For sure, thank you. All right, last question. Is there any specific cookie consent library that you would recommend to use for handling the consent status before loading a script?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm kind of like partially immune to, I've been partially immune to the whole cookie banner issue so far, so I haven't implemented one myself. I think if you can get away with implementing it yourself, I would recommend that, because a lot of these cookie consent libraries are very bloated. they're loading in a bunch of UI, things like this. But I understand that it gets a bit, the legal issues related to cookies get way over people's heads. So I can't point you in a specific direction. I'm sorry.
That's so helpful. Well, thank you so much, Harlan. We greatly appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, y'all. It's time to wrap up for day one. And thank you for hanging out with us today. A huge shout out for our amazing sponsors, CK Editor, Vito, Instant Dev, Certificates Dev, View School, Level Up, and you know we're not done. Be sure to check out everybody on the expo, which is like basically everybody we mentioned, and Bitter Brains. So check that out. But I know that everybody's way more interested. Maybe it's just me. I want to know who found the ducks. And if you have your dev stack story. And we do have our 2 winners. So for Spot the Secret 3, today's winner is Melanie Vortman. We will reach out to you via email. And for the second one of your Dev Stack Story Challenge, Hans, congratulations. We will reach out to you on Twitter and let you know. But in the meantime, let's heart it and repost it. So thank you, Hans. And make sure that you join us back tomorrow. We have more exciting things tomorrow and Thursday. Can't wait to see you again. Bye.
Transform your content creation with CK Editor 5, built for developers, loved by content creators. Integrate CK Editor seamlessly into any web application. Enjoy CK Editor Builder with complete flexibility with over 100 plugins, custom toolbar configurations, and ease of build. Work smarter with mentions and both asynchronous and real-time collaboration features like comments, track changes, and more. Create faster together. Completely customizable with powerful APIs, CK Editor adapts to your needs, whether you're building a simple blog or a complex content platform. Experience the power of CK Editor for your application with a free trial. Start building better content today with a rich text editor that's fast, flexible, and fully customizable.
Are you ready?
Hey everyone, it's Michael Thiessen here, and I am your instructor for Mastering Nuxt 3. And Mastering Nuxt 3 is a really awesome course if you are looking to learn Nuxt 3. We start from the very beginning with understanding how routing works, how you can put together dynamic routes with children, nested, and we go from there all the way down to the back end. We cover a whole wide array of things that will help you to build real-world full-stack applications with Nuxt 3.